This video is sponsored by Squarespace. When we talk about dark romance, abusive roleplays, we usually either adopt the "it's not reality, it's a fantasy, and it's okay" stance, or the "this is problematic, it promotes abuse and domestic violence" stance. The reason why people feel the need to adopt this or that stance and share it publicly is because the genre of dark romance has become increasingly popular, despite Me Too, despite all the domestic violence awareness campaigns. Like, we have made articles, videos, essays explaining how art romanticizes abuse, but still, people, especially women and increasingly young women, are drawn to it. Why? Well, when I read the comment sections under the videos and the reviews on Goodreads, I noticed that a lot of women said they identified the female character in the stories. They had gone through similar things in their own lives, but this time they had control over it. They could click off the video, stop reading, etc. So on an individual level, these stories, confusing romance with violence, gave them a space to project past traumas. Readers also shared that it reassured them to know that people have gone through the same things. They didn't feel as alone. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't read a lot of dark romance, but I wrote a collection of romances when I was younger, and I wanted to find people to review them, and I found those people on dark romance Facebook groups. There are a lot of them, and that's how I got familiar with the genre. Most of the time, the story revolves around a male and female character falling in love with each other and developing a toxic relationship because of power imbalances, and finally they resolve their problems or find a way to make it work, usually at the expense of the female character. Tropes like the Stockholm syndrome, in French we have the expression syndrome de l'infirmière, meaning the nurse syndrome, which means that the female partner seeks to cure her husband or boyfriend at all costs, are very often used in dark romance. These terms and expressions reflect women's tendency to invest way more time and energy in their relationships in comparison to men. The job of dark romance literature and videos is to turn that into something romantic. The woman's complete devotion to her lover is an act of love. In return, the lover's excessive possessiveness and jealousy is understood as an act of love too. Now, most people do believe that jealousy and investment in the relationship are signs that the person is in love. Most people enjoy when they can feel that their partner is a little bit jealous because of a friend, because of a work colleague. It makes us feel wanted, and that is a rather good feeling. It boosts our egos. Maybe you remember a few months ago, surfer Sarah Brady, the ex-girlfriend of actor Jonah Hill, shared some texts that he has sent her where he instrumentalized his jealousy to basically ask her to stop interacting with male surfers and remove bikini pictures from her social media. This was going too far, and this is all too common. In the roleplay videos on TikTok, in the dark romance books, verbal and physical violence is often motivated by jealousy, and the person made responsible for that feeling is not the jealous person, in that case the man, but rather the woman, so the person who triggered the jealousy. Now I feel like I need to say this, but obviously jealousy, domestic violence, emotional abuse can be experienced by heterosexual men, women, but also by queer people. It just happens that we're talking about dark romance and the genre has a female audience and the dynamics are very heteronormative. But that doesn't change anything to the fact that jealousy is often used to make the partner feel guilty and then use that guilt to legitimize the other partner's physical and verbal abuse. The abuse is seen as a legitimate response to a perceived threat, even though that threat was fabricated in the abuser's mind. What I'm saying basically is that jealousy is often the result of the potential abuser's insecurity. They fear that they might lose you and they will do anything in their power to keep you close to them, even if that means to isolate you from friends or anyone who could make you challenge your relationship.
Fuck out of here, you're bugging. You think you're gonna go out showing that much skin?
For me, the issue with things like dark romance, toxic roleplays is that it has the aesthetic of sexual liberation, but it is not sexual liberation. It has the aesthetic of sexual liberation because the images as well as the content is explicitly sexual. It challenges society's conservatism towards sex. But for me, it's only an aesthetic. It's kind of fake. Just to quickly remind you, the sexual revolution has started or accelerated in the 1960s. The feminist movement demanded that women get easier access to contraception, to abortion, etc., that greater attention be given to women's health and sex education. Gay liberation movements also campaigned for greater acceptance of homosexuality and less conservative forms of relationships. The problem is that these movements gained momentum at the same time that neoliberalism was gaining momentum, and so they were in some part co-opted by it. We've seen the same processes with things like greenwashing, with woke-washing, pink-washing, the girl boss, etc. Capitalism responds to the socio-economic and environmental issues in society by incorporating them into the market, by turning those movements into something that can be consumed. What remains then is only the aesthetic of these movements, the rainbow flag on socks, the girl boss motivational quotes, black excellence, or hypersexual music videos. The political component of those movements slowly disappears. In the case of the sexual liberation, well, feminists have warned that things like polyamory, open relationships, etc. get instrumentalized to cheat on partners or reproduce harmful gendered dynamics. Victoire Tuaillon in particular talked about some men who listen to her feminist podcast on love and relationships and then believe it is transgressive, progressive even, to have their own little harem or whatnot. But that is not what sexual liberation stands for. It doesn't mean that now it is progressive to cheat on your partner or build a harem. We can say the same thing about dark romance or toxic role plays. There is nothing sexually liberating about romanticizing abuse. French YouTuber Lilia also brilliantly explained that the ability for women to have a space to project past traumas, including domestic violence, is good. But the trauma is explored in a circular way. There is no resolution. The toxicity of the relationship is rarely condemned. So we must be careful not to confuse transgression and liberation. Transgression is not revolution. Transgression uses the norm as a basis to challenge. Instead, revolution gets rid of the norm. Now, if we look at this issue from a sociological perspective, and I'm going to use my experience with dark romance Facebook groups, we see that people who are drawn to the stories tend to be women who have rather conventional lives. By conventional, I mean heterosexual, low middle class, house in the suburb with hubby, dogs and kids type of life. Many of the women I met on these groups were housewives who enjoyed reading and writing fantasies, transgressive stories to escape the routine. We're talking about people for whom the typical marriage jokes, boys do this and girls do that stereotypes or gender roles are something that they never questioned much because it has always appeared as natural to them. Their parents did it, friends do it. I think I have already mentioned this on my channel, but I would often read comments like, quote, "I wish my husband was a bit more confident, it turns me on," or, quote, "Is it bad to think about, insert dark romance male character, to reach orgasm with my boyfriend?" And they would post that right after another post asking for childcare advice or things like that. The Facebook groups were a safe space to talk about their sexual frustrations, but also their lives as women living in the suburbs. As someone who has always rejected heteronormativity, so gender roles, gendered stereotypes, I entered those spaces with skepticism and judgment, let's be honest. But as time passed by, I developed sympathy for these women who were honestly so supportive of each other and also very funny. I mean, we clearly did not have the same aspirations in life and the same opinions on various things related to relationships. Like whenever I talked about open relationships or drawing a separation between sex and a relationship, love, they would look at me as if I was an extremist. They would say things like, "I would be too jealous," and I would say, "But you should be able to trust your partner and not feel like they belong to you. If you are comfortable in your own skin, you wouldn't feel jealous." Then they would usually look very concerned and say things like, "You should know men, if you let them cheat, they will cheat. It's in their nature. Women don't cheat as much because we need an intimate connection." I mean, back in the days, I used to believe that that was true because that's how I thought I felt. I thought that women could only find happiness in long-term, stable relationships and that men, on the other hand, could get away with one-night stands. It's only later that I realized that intimacy can be felt very easily with some people or can take months and months to forge with others. Being in a relationship with someone doesn't necessarily make it easier to be intimate with them. But my friend was reluctant to hear about that. I mean, it's precisely because they are trapped in those scripts, in those essentialist assumptions about men and women's nature, that these women struggle to fantasize beyond heteronormative role plays, where the man controls and the women submit.
Enlighten me then.
As I was writing this video, I couldn't help but wonder what people would fantasize about if we all lived in an egalitarian society. I mean, people's fantasies evolve across cultures and ethnicities, so what would it look like if men, women, and NBs were all equal? Some say sex would be better. I mean, there are a few studies that show that when couples share house chores, their sex lives tends to be better. But I'm not sure, and you can share what you think about it in the comment section. I'm not sure that people would stop fantasizing about sneaky illegal things. In fact, when you think about it, it is surprising to see that teenage girls, who are increasingly aware of gender inequality and sexual violence, turn so much to dark romance and toxic roleplays. It sounds contradictory, like why? Why after Me Too, after 4 waves of feminism, do they still fantasize about abusive roleplays? Well, the answer may be that sexual liberation hasn't reached pop culture yet. And I don't mean the aesthetic of sexual liberation, no. That is very present at celebrity shows, in music videos. Pop culture, the advertising industry are representative of what I was explaining earlier, that neoliberalism co-opts social movements, remove all the politics, and only keeps what is fun, what is empowering, what is consumable. When I say that sexual liberation hasn't reached pop culture, what I'm referring to instead is the notion of desire, for example. Democratizing knowledge around this notion of desire can help people understand how they feel it, the ways in which they want to feel it. I mean, how can people know what they desire when only one script is presented to them? One in which the person, usually the man, is in power and the other partner, usually the woman, isn't. We must create new scripts, or get rid of the idea of a script altogether. It's precisely by exploring the unknown that partners can discover new things about themselves. But before we achieve that, and it's probably gonna take a little while because of how we disregard sex education, before we achieve that, we can work on changing the ending of the scripts that already exist. I don't really trust TikTok creators who say that their toxic roleplays are meant to educate teenage girls on what abuse looks like. I don't trust them because there is absolutely no disclaimer in the video, no positive ending. However, I found out about someone called Mikey Marrero. He has a whole series on toxic boyfriend roleplays that is super popular. So his videos start in the same manner as the other toxic boyfriend videos, but they end very differently. In this one, for example, Mikey complains that his girlfriend is dressed too sexy to go see her female friends. He gets really mad and ends up dressing the same way to come with her. In other ones, he clearly shows that the feeling of jealousy and the violence stemming from it are signs of insecurity. I like those videos because they are transgressive, but in a good way. They show how important it is to first challenge the scripts that we are given, to open the door for a broader deconstruction of how heterosexual relationships, so relationships are usually based on power, but again, it's not limited to heterosexuality. How does relationships function, basically? I'm also reminded, as I'm saying this, of Mikara Tour's comment on the Barbie movie. She was frustrated that male characters are either female characters risen for existing, or they are dumb and mean. She wished Ken ended up being a better guy, or that at least viewers were given one example of a healthy relationship. But I would nuance that a tiny bit and add that I don't think having a nice, loving Ken would solve the issue. As I said in my video on healthy masculinity, I don't believe that we should replace the bad role models with good role models, or to put it differently, to change the bad script with a good script. I think that what dark romance readers and viewers of toxic roleplays enjoy is the fact that the characters aren't morally good. I personally, and I know many other people, love to explore the complexity of what it means to be human. We love to see people being authentic, which means that sometimes they will do things that aren't morally good. And it's okay. What is interesting to me is how they navigate the issues they encounter, how they struggle, go back to bad habits. I want to see characters who prioritize doing the right thing over adopting the posture that was deemed right. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. I would like to thank my patrons for their support, and a special thanks to top tier patrons Patrick Riley, Boris, Ria, Joey Esguerra, Yvan, Rémi, Trébizonde, Corrigi, Toki, Tristan, Patricia, Jan, Donage, Alex, Ren, Manuel, Perry, and all the other ones who preferred to stay anonymous. Before I leave, as per usual, I need to talk to you about our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. You can create your own website around your preferred aesthetic from a catalog of templates and use it as a landing platform for all the activity you do: YouTube, online shop, blog, podcast, photography, etc. Once that is set up, you can connect all your social media accounts and share content between different platforms. Squarespace can also help you create effective email campaigns to really connect with your community. Finally, they have this very cool feature where you can connect and learn from other creators like Adrien Raquel, who will show you how you can best use the platform. If you feel like Squarespace is made for you and you want to check it out, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you've experimented and you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/alice.cappelleyt to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and yeah, I'll see you very soon. Salut!